Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little darker. A time of longships, battle axes, and remarkably poor hygiene. We're diving into what life was really like during the Viking Age. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 872 CE. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, you're a Viking. And everyone around you smells like fermented fish. Your bed is a pile of itchy straw stuffed into a wooden frame, covered with a scratchy wool blanket that hasn't been washed since your grandfather raided Britain. There's no memory foam, no pillows, and definitely no Egyptian cotton sheets. Just animal skins that still have ticks living in them, and the lingering smell of the goats they came from. You blink awake as the rooster crows outside your longhouse. It's the Viking version of an alarm clock, only louder and somehow even less merciful. Your home is a wooden longhouse with one room, barely any windows, and a charming open concept floor plan where your family, livestock, and various insects all share the same space. The smell. Oh, it's a fragrant symphony, a subtle blend of stale mead, human sweat, animal dung, and the smoke from your central hearth that's supposed to escape through a hole in the roof, but mostly just hangs around making everyone cough. Scented candles haven't been invented, and even if they were, they'd just melt on your dirt floor. You try to stretch, but immediately regret it because the air is freezing and your joints ache. You're 25 years old, which in Viking terms means you're practically middle-aged. Your spine creaks like the planks of your longship, and your knees sound like Thor himself is cracking walnuts inside them. Getting out of bed is a gamble. The floor is either wet from last night's rain, which leaks through the thatched roof, or crusty from something your neighbor's chicken did. Either way, your bare feet are now part of the ecosystem. Oh, and privacy? What's that? Your entire family, and maybe a random cousin who just never left, are waking up beside you. There's no bedroom, no curtains, no me time, just communal everything. Welcome to morning in Viking Scandinavia, where you're never truly alone because parasites, rodents, and 8 other people are always with you. And this is just how your day starts. It only gets worse from here. So, you've managed to crawl out of your Norse nest of nightmares. Congrats. Now, nature calls. And it's not calling politely, it's screaming. Here's the part where you start missing modern bathrooms. There's no toilet, no seat, no toilet paper, no flush, not even a mildly resentful plunger in the corner. In the 9th century, relieving yourself is an adventure, a social experiment, and often a small public event. If you were a Viking at home, your bathroom is likely a wooden bucket in the corner of the longhouse, which is already full because Uncle Bjorn had a rough night after drinking too much mead. The smell is mythological. You hold your breath, do your business, and then here's the kicker. You empty it into a cesspit outside or use it as fertilizer for your crops. Yes, waste management is just part of the circular economy here in Viking land. If you're on a raid, things get even more primitive. It's either over the side of the longship, hope you've got good balance, or a quick dash into the woods when you make landfall. Either way, privacy is a luxury no one can afford. And if you're in a hurry to pillage a monastery, well, let's just say the monks will have more than one reason to fear your arrival. Toilet paper? Never heard of it. Most Vikings wipe with moss, leaves, smooth stones, or, if they're feeling especially fancy, wool scraps. Sometimes nothing at all, which might explain why handshakes weren't popular yet. And hygiene overall? Well, despite what you might have heard, Vikings were actually fairly clean by medieval standards, which is saying almost nothing. Many did bathe weekly, which made them practically obsessive compared to some of their European contemporaries. But this bath is just a dip in the fjord, or, if you're lucky, a communal hot spring. Soap is a luxury made from animal fat and wood ash, and it smells exactly how you're imagining. You're supposed to clean your teeth by chewing on a stick. That's it. That's dental care. By age 25, your smile already looks like a battlefield after the ravens have had their fill. Teeth are broken, blackened, or missing entirely. The concept of oral hygiene is still mostly wait until it hurts, then pull it out with metal tools. After this invigorating morning ritual, it's time for breakfast. Something warm, delicious, comforting. Sorry, this is Viking Europe. Nothing is comforting here. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a grim affair. There's no coffee, no toast, and certainly no avocado. You sit down to a wooden bowl of something that looks like it was scraped off the bottom of a longship. Welcome to your daily ration of gruel. It's a thick, goopy porridge made of barley or oats, boiled in water or whey. On a good day, there might be some dried fruit or honey stirred in. On a normal day, it's just hot, bland mush that you force down because you'll need the energy for all the rowing, raiding, and running for your life you'll be doing later. On the side, there's a hunk of dark bread so hard it could be used as a weapon. It's made from whatever grain survived the winter: rye, barley, or oats. White bread is for weaklings, and wheat is a southern luxury. This loaf is not your friend. You don't slice it. You hack at it with your knife and hope it doesn't dull the blade. What about drinks? You're not sipping orange juice or a cappuccino. You're drinking ale, even at breakfast. Why? Because the water is often unsafe, and fermentation kills germs. Not that anyone understands the science. It's weak ale, low alcohol, and everyone drinks it. Men, women, and even children. No one's happy about it, but at least it won't kill you immediately. Want some meat or cheese? That depends on your status. If you're a jarl, a chieftain, you might have some smoked fish or preserved meat even in the morning. If you're a regular warrior or farmer, you'll be lucky to see meat once a day, usually at the evening meal. Eggs might make an appearance if your chickens have been productive, but they're more valuable as future chickens than as breakfast. So you chew your gritty porridge, gnaw your battle-axe bread, gulp your morning beer, and try not to think about the fact that this is actually one of the better meals you'll have today. Breakfast doesn't energize you. It just happens to you. And now that you're properly underfed, it's time to get dressed for a day of pillage and plunder. So you've eaten your sad medieval breakfast, and now it's time to get dressed. Not that it'll help. Your wardrobe consists of exactly one outfit, maybe two if you're wealthy. One, it's a rough wool tunic or linen shirt that you've worn every day for months, possibly years. There's no such thing as seasonal fashion. There's just wear this until it disintegrates or gives you a fungal infection. Underwear, optional. If you're lucky, maybe a linen undertunic. If you're not, well, you're going commando under layers of scratchy, itchy wool, all lovingly hand-woven by the women of your village who probably cursed your name with every stitch. There's no washing machine, no soap as you know it, and absolutely no dry cleaner in sight. So your clothes are stained, stiff, and smell like a combination of old sweat, fish, and whatever you killed last week. Let's talk about pants. You've got baggy trousers made of wool or linen, gathered at the ankle or knee. They're held up with a drawstring or a belt, because elastic waistbands are about 1,000 years in the future. When these pants tear, and they will tear, you patch them until they're more patch than original pant. Throwing clothes away is a concept so wasteful it would make your Viking ancestors disown you. Over your tunic goes a belt, not as a fashion statement, but as essential equipment. This is where you hang your axe, a large knife, your fire-starting kit, maybe a small pouch containing your worldly treasures, which amount to exactly 3 silver coins and a pretty rock you found. If it's cold, and in Scandinavia it's almost always cold, you add a cloak made of heavy wool. It's secured with a brooch at the shoulder, which serves as both functional fastener and a display of your wealth. If you're a poor Viking, it's simple iron. If you're wealthy, it might be bronze or even silver with intricate designs of dragons or knotwork. This is the closest thing to a status symbol you're getting. And shoes, if you own any. They're simple leather affairs with about as much arch support as a dead fish. They're made from a single piece of leather, gathered and stitched around your foot. When the ground is wet, which in Scandinavia is always, they soak through immediately. Your feet are perpetually damp, cold, and probably developing an impressive variety of fungal conditions. Many Vikings just go barefoot when the weather permits, letting their calloused feet tackle the terrain like leathery natural boots. Now, for the accessories. You might have an arm ring if you've proven yourself in battle or earned a jarl's favor. You definitely have lice. Everyone has lice. Nobles, commoners, even the priests you'll be terrifying later today. Your skin itches constantly, and scratching has become so normal you do it in your sleep. Your beard, if you're a man, is probably home to an entire ecosystem of tiny creatures. If you're a woman, your long hair is similarly infested, though you might keep it bound up under a head covering. Your skin is wind-chapped. Your hands are cracked from work, and you've got a collection of scars from everyday accidents, fights, and that time you tried to catch a fish with your bare hands to impress a shield maiden. It didn't work, so there you are, dressed in your medieval best, itchy, smelly, crawling with tiny passengers, and still somehow ready to terrorize the coasts of Europe. Because when everyone smells bad, no one smells bad. It's just the fragrance of the 9th century. And now that you're properly attired in discomfort, it's time to head to your longship and start the real agony of the day, rowing. Now that you're dressed in your finest filth, it's time for the main event, boarding your longship and setting sail for a day of raiding. But forget those majestic imagery of Vikings proudly sailing the high seas. The reality is a floating nightmare of splinters, seasickness, and surprisingly intimate quarters. Your longship is indeed a marvel of medieval engineering. A sleek, shallow-drafted vessel that can navigate both open seas and shallow rivers. But it's not exactly a luxury cruise. The entire ship is open to the elements. There's no cabin, no quarters, no privacy. Just you and about 30 to 60 other unwashed, grumpy warriors sitting shoulder to shoulder on hard wooden benches that double as your sleeping space. Let's talk about those benches. They're made of raw wood, offering all the comfort of sitting on a tree stump for hours at a time. There are no cushions, no back support, and absolutely no leg room. Your knees are practically touching the back of the Viking in front of you, and the guy behind you is so close you can feel his breath on your neck. The concept of personal space won't be invented for another 1,000 years. Time to row. Forget those Hollywood scenes where Vikings are just chilling while their ship magically moves forward. When there's no wind, which happens often, you're rowing and rowing and rowing some more. Each oar weighs about 20 pounds, and you're expected to pull it through churning seas for hours on end. Your hands blister, then callus, then blister on top of the calluses. Your shoulders burn, your back screams, but if you stop, you get the delightful combination of social shame and possibly being thrown overboard for weakness. Speaking of the sea, it's not your friend. The North Sea and Atlantic are freezing cold, violently rough, and seem personally offended by your presence. Waves crash over the sides of the ship constantly. You're perpetually damp, salt-crusted, and chilled to the bone. Hypothermia isn't a medical condition to be treated. It's just Tuesday. Weather forecasts? That's a good joke. Your captain looks at the sky, maybe sacrifices something to Njord, god of the sea and wind, and makes an educated guess. Sometimes that guess is catastrophically wrong, and you find yourself in a storm so fierce you're convinced Ragnarok has begun early. Lightning cracks overhead. Waves the size of mountains threaten to capsize your vessel, and you're praying to gods you're not even sure you believe in anymore. Sleeping arrangements? Hilarious. When night falls, you sleep right where you sit, maybe with a wool blanket if you're lucky, but more likely just huddled against your shield brothers for warmth. The benches are too narrow to lie flat, so you sleep sitting up or curled into impossible positions that leave you more exhausted than when you started. Some Vikings might climb into the sail when it's furled, creating a kind of primitive hammock, arguably the most comfortable spot on the ship, and thus fiercely competitive. Food on board is somehow worse than on land. Salt pork, hard bread that could break teeth, and skyr, a yogurt-like dairy product, if you're fortunate. Everything is partially rotten, heavily salted, or dried to the consistency of tree bark. Fresh water is limited and becomes brackish within days. Mostly, you drink more ale, which dehydrates you further, but at least numbs the misery. Oh, and let's discuss bathroom facilities. There aren't any. Need to relieve yourself. Hang your backside over the side of the ship and hope the sea is calm. Everyone watches. Everyone comments. Performance anxiety is real, especially when waves are threatening to wash away more than your dignity. And the smell. By Thor's hammer, the smell. Dozens of unwashed bodies, wet wool, damp leather, stale food, fish, both the cargo and the pervasive smell of the sea. Vomit from the seasick. Viking or not, some stomachs never adjust to the constant rolling, and the ever-present aroma of fear sweat as another storm approaches. It's a bouquet of putrescence that seeps into your clothes, your hair, your very soul. But look on the bright side. After 2 to 5 days of this floating torture chamber, you'll reach land. And then the real danger begins as you prepare to raid a foreign shore with people who are justifiably unhappy about your arrival. Now, with cramped muscles, sleep deprivation, and malnutrition, you're expected to leap from the ship and start swinging an axe like your life depends on it. Because it absolutely does. After days of nautical misery, land appears on the horizon. A monastery, a small village, or a trading post. Something that promises riches and relatively light resistance. Everyone on the ship perks up. This is why you endured the rowing, the cold, the endless damp. It's raiding time. Except real raiding is nothing like the glorious charges you've imagined. First, there's the beach landing. Your longship, for all its impressive engineering, doesn't have a convenient boarding ramp. It needs to slide up onto a beach, and sometimes, surprise, the beach isn't empty. Locals tend to dislike uninvited axe-wielding guests and might greet you with a hail of arrows, spears, or rocks. So, your first task is to jump into freezing water that might be waist-deep, wearing all your gear, and wade ashore while potentially being shot at. Already, your boots are waterlogged. Your wool clothes have doubled in weight, and hypothermia is setting in. Let's talk about your weapons and armor. Contrary to popular depictions, most Vikings didn't have horned helmets. Those would be impractical in battle and were likely only used for ceremonies, if at all. If you're lucky enough to have a helmet, many Vikings couldn't afford them. It's a simple, rounded iron cap. Maybe with a nose guard. No face protection. No fancy plumes. Just a basic metal bowl to keep your skull from being immediately split open. Armor? Again, if you're wealthy or successful, you might have a mail shirt, often called chainmail. It's effective, but incredibly heavy, about 20 to 30 pounds, and not exactly comfortable to wear all day while fighting. More commonly, you'd have a padded tunic, maybe reinforced with small metal plates if you've had a particularly good year of plundering. Many Vikings raided with just their normal clothes and a shield. Speaking of shields, this is your primary defense. It's a round wooden board with an iron boss in the center, painted with bright colors or designs to identify your crew. In theory, it protects you from enemy weapons. In practice, a few good hits will splinter it, leaving you remarkably vulnerable. Your weapons are simple but deadly. An axe, a spear, a sword if you're high status, or a knife called a seax that everybody carries. These aren't magically balanced, perfectly crafted instruments of war. They're utilitarian tools that require strength and skill to wield effectively. Your axe handle might give you splinters. Your sword, if you have one, requires constant maintenance to prevent rust in the damp sea air. Everything is heavier than modern replicas, making your arms burn after just minutes of fighting. Now, the actual combat. Forget elaborate duels or heroic one-on-one confrontations. Viking raids were chaotic, terrifying, and often quick. The goal was to overwhelm with shock and speed, grab valuables, and get out before any serious resistance could be organized. You're not fighting for honor. You're fighting for survival and profit. The violence is intimate and horrifying. There's no distance between you and your enemies. You can smell their fear sweat. See the whites of their eyes. Feel the vibration when your weapon connects with their body. Blood isn't dramatic and cinematic. It's hot, sticky, and gets everywhere. It soaks your clothes, makes your grip slippery, gets in your eyes and mouth. The sounds aren't heroic war cries, but screams of pain, begging for mercy, and the wet, meaty thunk of weapons finding flesh. Injuries are catastrophic. Medical care consists of crude bandages, maybe cauterization, and possibly some herbal poultices of questionable effectiveness. A serious wound means lingering death from infection. A head injury might leave you with seizures or personality changes for however much life you have left. Even a minor wound like a deep cut can turn septic within days. And you're not just fighting armed men. Sometimes you are raiding poorly defended places, monasteries, villages, farms. Your targets might include the elderly, women, children. The psychological toll of this kind of violence isn't something Vikings wrote sagas about, but it's there, seeping into your dreams, changing you with each raid. If you survive the initial assault, then comes the pillaging. This isn't a shopping spree. It's frantic, desperate grabbing of anything that looks valuable. Silver, gold, jewelry, religious artifacts, food, tools, weapons, even people to be sold as slaves. You're carrying all this while maintaining vigilance against counterattacks or the arrival of local defenders. Finally, there's the retreat. Loaded down with plunder, possibly wounded, definitely exhausted, you have to make it back to your ship before reinforcements arrive. If the tide has gone out, you might have to drag your now heavier vessel back to deeper water. If too many of your crew have been killed or injured, you might not have enough rowers to make a swift escape. Congratulations. If you've survived your first raid, you get to sail back home, assuming storms, enemy ships, or disease don't claim you on the return journey. And when you get there, you'll have to deal with the politics of dividing the spoils, the physical toll of your injuries, and perhaps the psychological weight of what you've seen and done. This is the reality of Viking raiding. Not glorious battle, but desperate, terrifying violence committed by cold, hungry men seeking wealth in a world where wealth meant survival. And if you think the raid was bad, wait until you have to deal with Viking politics back home. You've survived your raid by some miracle. Maybe you even got a decent share of the plunder, a silver arm ring, some hack silver, literally hacked up pieces of silver used as currency, or a fancy Christian cross that you have no idea what to do with except maybe melt down. Now you're back in your Viking settlement, and it's time to enjoy the social life. Except Viking social dynamics make high school cafeterias look like models of stability and fairness. Let's start with the basics. Viking society was hierarchical, with jarls, chieftains, nobles at the top, then carls, free farmers and warriors, and thralls, slaves, at the bottom. Where you stand in this hierarchy determines everything: what you eat, where you live, who you can marry, whether your opinion matters at all. Social mobility exists, but it's limited. A successful warrior might rise through the ranks, but most people die in the same social position they were born into. Your jarl is your leader, protector, and potential problem all rolled into one. He's supposed to provide feasts, settle disputes, and lead in war. In return, you give him loyalty, a portion of your plunder, and fighting service when called upon. This relationship works great when your jarl is competent, fair, and successful. But if he's an impulsive, drunken fool who picks fights with neighboring jarls for stupid reasons, too bad. You're still bound to him by oaths and social expectations. Reputation is everything. The Norse concept of honor, what they would call hamingja, dictates your worth in society. Every action you take is scrutinized and remembered. Did you fight bravely? Great. Did you hesitate or show fear? People will talk about it for generations. Did you break an oath? You might as well exile yourself now. Vikings were world-class grudge holders, and social memory was long and detailed. Making it worse, everyone gossips constantly. The long winter nights in the longhouse are filled with stories, most of them about other people in the community. Secrets don't stay secret. That embarrassing incident where you slipped off the dock and had to be fished out of the fjord, everyone knows, and they've embellished it to involve a sea monster and 3 maidens. Conflict resolution is problematic. There are laws and customs, yes, but enforcement is spotty at best. Disputes often escalate to blood feuds that can last for generations. Your great-grandfather insulted someone's beard in 782 CE. Their family might still be trying to kill yours in 872. These feuds follow careful rules. There's a strange formality to Norse violence, but they're devastating to communities and families. The thing, assembly, is where formal disputes are heard and social decisions made. These gatherings of free men are in theory democratic, but in practice they're dominated by the powerful and well-connected. Justice is often determined by who has more supporters shouting their approval. Trial by combat is a real option for settling disputes, literally fighting for your innocence, which obviously favors the young and strong over the righteous. Friendships are intense but complicated. Your shield brothers from the raid might be the closest bonds you'll ever form, people who've saved your life and shared unimaginable hardships. But those same friends might turn on you over an insult, a woman, or a particularly shiny piece of plunder. Alliances shift constantly, and yesterday's blood brother could be today's blood feud. Marriage isn't about love, but alliance building and property. Women have more rights than in many contemporary societies. They can own property, request divorce, and run households. But marriages are still arranged for political and economic advantage. Divorce is relatively easy to obtain by medieval standards, but it often triggers complex property disputes and can ignite feuds between families. Religion permeates everything. The Norse gods aren't distant figures, but present forces believed to be actively involved in daily life. Odin, Thor, Freyr, Freya. These aren't just mythological characters, but powers to be appeased, thanked, or feared. Religious rituals mark every significant event, and failing to properly honor the gods can bring misfortune on the entire community. And you'd better participate enthusiastically, because religious skepticism isn't viewed kindly. Entertainment? Hope you like drinking, boasting, and wrestling. Feasts are the primary social events, opportunities to display wealth, cement alliances, and get catastrophically drunk on mead or ale. Games often turn violent, with friendly competitions ending in serious injuries or new blood feuds. Music exists, but is simple by modern standards. Drums, simple flutes, and sung verses of heroic deeds or cutting insults called flighting, essentially medieval rap battles. Dating is almost non-existent as a concept. Marriages are arranged, but premarital sex happens with varying consequences depending on the status of those involved. Romantic love exists in the sagas, but is often portrayed as a destructive force that leads to tragedy, not as the foundation for a healthy relationship. Oh, and winter changes everything. During the long, dark Scandinavian winters, most of the community is crammed into longhouses for months. Privacy vanishes entirely. Tempers fray. Minor annoyances become major grievances. By spring, you're either bonded for life with your housemates or plotting their demise. This is Viking social life. Intense, honor-obsessed, violent, and governed by unwritten rules that everyone somehow expects you to know instinctively. Make one wrong move, say the wrong thing to the wrong person, or fail to uphold your end of a complex social contract, and you might find yourself outcast, impoverished, or on the receiving end of a very legitimately earned axe to the face. After weeks of living in your smoke-filled longhouse, eating questionable food, and being wounded in raids, you're not feeling great. Maybe you've got a festering wound, a hacking cough, or a fever that's making your eyeballs feel like they're cooking inside your skull. Time to visit a doctor. Except Viking healthcare makes modern emergency rooms look like luxury spas. First, let's acknowledge that the Vikings did have a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of some medical concepts. They practiced decent wound care, knew some effective herbal remedies, and even performed primitive surgeries with reasonable success rates for the 9th century. But that's where the good news ends. Viking medicine blended practical knowledge with supernatural beliefs in a way that might kill you faster than the original ailment. Disease was believed to be caused by imbalances in the body, evil spirits, or the displeasure of the gods, sometimes all three simultaneously. Diagnosis often involved divination, reading runes, or interpreting dreams alongside any actual physical examination. Let's say you've got a wound from that last raid. It's red, swollen, and oozing something that definitely shouldn't be oozing from a human body. The treatment: first, cleaning with water, urine, yes, urine, or alcohol, all with varying levels of effectiveness at actually killing bacteria. Then, applying poultices made of herbs like yarrow, mugwort, or angelica, which might contain some antibacterial properties but are equally likely to introduce new contaminants into the wound. If that doesn't work, there's always cauterization, heating a metal tool until it's glowing red, and then pressing it against your wound to burn it closed. No anesthesia, no sterilization of instruments, just white-hot metal searing your flesh while someone holds you down. The theory was that this would stop bleeding and kill the bad humors, causing infection. In reality, it sometimes worked through sheer luck, and other times just added a severe burn to your growing list of medical problems. For broken bones, setting was done by feel, with no x-rays to guide the process. The bone might be manipulated back into roughly the right position, then splinted with wood and wrapped with linen bandages. If it healed crooked, which was common, that was your problem for life. Enjoy your new limp, asymmetrical face or hand that can never fully close again. Got a toothache? Dental care consists of extraction with iron pincers. Again, no anesthesia. Or applying various substances to the affected tooth, including salt, pepper, or garlic. Some of these might temporarily relieve pain through numbing effects, but none addressed the underlying problem. By age 40, most Vikings had lost many of their teeth, making eating increasingly difficult and contributing to malnutrition in older age. Internal medicine was where things got really creative. Stomach pain might be treated with various herbal teas or poultices placed on the abdomen. Some, like chamomile or mint, actually helped. Others were at best useless and at worst toxic. Laxatives were common treatments for almost any internal complaint, the theory being that purging the body would remove whatever bad humors were causing the problem. This often led to dehydration, which made the original condition worse. Bleeding was another popular treatment imported from other European medical traditions. Got a fever? Let's drain some of your blood into a bowl. Headache? More bleeding. Skin condition? You guessed it, bleeding. The theory was that this would restore balance to the body's humors. In practice, it weakened patients who were already fighting infection or disease. Mental health issues were generally attributed to spiritual problems, possession by spirits, curses, or the influence of malevolent magic. Treatments ranged from consuming concoctions of psychoactive herbs to wearing protective amulets to more extreme measures like trepanation, drilling a hole in the skull to release evil spirits. Surprisingly, archaeological evidence shows some people survived this procedure, though whether their condition improved is anybody's guess. Childbirth was particularly dangerous, handled exclusively by women midwives who had practical knowledge passed down through generations. They knew how to turn breech babies and manage some complications, but without antibiotics, cesarean sections, or blood transfusions, many common problems were fatal to mother, child, or both. Women approached childbirth with the same mindset as men approaching battle, with courage and fatalism, knowing it might be their last day. Preventative medicine consisted mainly of protective magical practices, wearing Thor's hammer pendants, carving protective runes on doorways, or making offerings to gods and spirits to maintain health. Not exactly a comprehensive public health strategy. The most common outcome of serious illness or injury was simply death. The average Viking lifespan ranged from 30 to 40 years, with many dying much younger from causes that would be easily treatable today. If you survived to middle age, you'd likely accumulated a collection of poorly healed injuries, chronic pain, and recurring health issues that were just accepted as the price of continuing to exist. So, the next time you complain about a hospital waiting room or the taste of modern medicine, remember that in Viking times your doctor might have prescribed drinking a concoction of herbs mixed with menstrual blood, followed by drilling a hole in your head while reciting prayers to Air, the goddess of healing. Modern healthcare doesn't seem so bad now, does it? Let's talk about the weather. Because in Viking Scandinavia, the climate isn't just unpleasant, it's actively trying to murder you with an impressive array of meteorological weapons. Let's start with winter, which isn't just a season but a 6-month siege against all living things. Winter in Scandinavia begins around October and fiercely refuses to leave until April or sometimes May. The darkness is the first enemy. At the height of winter in northern regions, you might get only 4 to 6 hours of weak, watery daylight. The rest is an oppressive, mind-altering darkness that fundamentally changes your sense of time and reality. The cold is beyond what modern humans typically experience. Without central heating, Gore-Tex, or thermal underwear, you're at the mercy of whatever warmth your fire, wool clothing, and shared body heat can provide. Temperatures regularly plunge far below freezing. Your breath crystallizes instantly. Your snot freezes in your nose. Your beard becomes decorated with ice crystals if you're a man, which might look majestic in a photograph, but is actually just uncomfortable and weird. Snow doesn't arrive in picturesque, gentle flurries, but in vicious, view-obliterating blizzards that can last for days. It piles against your longhouse, blocks doorways, and makes even short journeys potentially lethal. If you get lost in a snowstorm, just walking to check on your animals, you might not be found until spring thaw reveals your perfectly preserved corpse. Inside your longhouse, the situation is marginally better, but still miserable. The fire provides heat, but can't warm the entire space. You huddle near it, rotating like a human rotisserie to warm different sides of your body. The side facing the fire burns, while the side facing away freezes. Finding the perfect distance is an endless, fidgety pursuit. Frostbite becomes an occupational hazard. Extremities, fingers, toes, ears, noses are particularly vulnerable. The early stages are painful, then numb, then eventually blackened and necrotic. Amputation might be necessary, performed with the same surgical finesse we discussed in the healthcare section, meaning none at all. Water becomes both precious and dangerous. Wells freeze. Streams and lakes develop thick ice that must be broken daily to access water. Melting snow becomes a constant chore, producing minimal water for maximum effort. Bathing becomes even less frequent than usual, adding new aromatic dimensions to your longhouse's ambiance. Food supplies dwindle as winter progresses. You rely on whatever you've preserved through smoking, drying, salting, or fermenting. By late winter, these stores often run dangerously low. The hunger months of late winter and early spring are marked by increasingly desperate meals and tightening belts. Many Vikings, particularly the elderly and very young, simply don't survive this annual famine. But surely summer brings relief. Not exactly. When winter finally releases its grip, you get a brief, glorious spring followed by a summer that brings its own uniquely Norse miseries. Summer in Scandinavia swings to the opposite extreme of daylight. In northern regions, the sun barely sets, creating the midnight sun phenomenon. While this might sound lovely for sightseeing, it wreaks havoc on sleep patterns. Your body, accustomed to taking its cues from daylight, becomes confused. Sleep becomes elusive, fractured, and unsatisfying. Everyone is low-key sleep-deprived and cranky. The rare, truly hot days turn your longhouse into an oven. The same design that somewhat retained heat in winter now traps it mercilessly. The thatched roof, the minimal windows, the central hearth that can't be fully extinguished because fire starting is difficult, all conspire to create a sauna-like atmosphere minus the pleasant associations. Insects arrive in biblical proportions. Mosquitoes swarm in clouds so thick they can be inhaled. Flies investigate every surface, person, and food item with disgusting thoroughness. Ticks lurk in grass and vegetation, waiting to embed themselves in your flesh and potentially deliver diseases you have no names for yet. Your livestock suffer from horseflies and botflies that lay eggs in their skin, creating painful, squirming lumps. Agriculture becomes a desperate race against time. Everything must be planted, tended, and harvested within the brief growing season. Everyone works from dawn until dusk, which in summer means potentially 18 to 20 hours of labor. Your back aches, your hands blister, and there's no such thing as a day off when your winter survival depends on summer productivity. Thunderstorms, when they arrive, are genuinely terrifying. Without modern weather forecasting, they appear with little warning. Lightning strikes wooden structures with predictably catastrophic results. Thunder rolls across the fjords and valleys with supernatural intensity. To the Viking mind, these aren't meteorological events, but manifestations of Thor's might, which provides minimal comfort when your roof is on fire from a lightning strike. Rain transforms cleared fields into mud pits, pathways into treacherous slides, and your carefully planted crops into drowned failures if it continues too long. Without Gore-Tex or modern waterproofing, you're perpetually damp. Your wool clothing, once wet, stays wet, developing new and interesting smells while chafing every conceivable surface of your body. Autumn is briefly pleasant before rapidly deteriorating into winter again. The cycle repeats year after year, wearing down your body and spirit, making every joint ache with accumulated cold, dampness, and hard labor. Weather in Viking Scandinavia isn't just an inconvenience or a topic for small talk. It's an adversary to be survived, a god to be appeased, and a constant reminder of human frailty in the face of nature's overwhelming power. When modern people romanticize Viking life, they somehow always forget to mention surviving winter with nothing but wool, fire, and stubborn Norse determination. There's a reason the Vikings went raiding. Sometimes anywhere else was better than home during the dark months. When most people think of Vikings, they imagine fearsome raiders sailing across seas to plunder foreign shores. But here's the uncinematic truth. Most Vikings spent most of their time farming, not fighting. Raiding was a seasonal side hustle. Agriculture was the daily grind that kept everyone alive, and it was about as glamorous as it sounds, which is not at all. Viking farming begins with the land itself, which in Scandinavia is not exactly the fertile paradise of farm country brochures. The terrain is rocky, hilly, and stubborn. Before you can plant anything, you first have to clear the land, removing stones, trees, and other vegetation. This is done with basic tools, wooden or iron-tipped plows, axes, and an endless supply of back-breaking labor. The growing season is cruelly short, just a few precious months between the last frost of spring and the first freeze of fall. Every day counts. Every seed matters. The margin between harvest success and winter starvation is terrifyingly narrow. Your primary crops are barley, rye, and oats, hardy grains that can tolerate the northern climate. Wheat is a luxury grown only in the most favorable southern locations. These aren't planted in tidy rows with mechanical precision, but broadcast by hand, scattered across the prepared soil with prayers to Friar, god of fertility and harvest, that enough will grow. Plowing is done with a scratch plow, a simple implement that doesn't turn the soil over but merely cuts a shallow furrow. It's pulled by oxen if you're lucky enough to have them, or by human power if you're not. Either way, it's exhausting work that leaves your hands blistered and your back aching before the seeds are even in the ground. Fertilizer comes from your animals and your own human waste. Yes, that cesspit we discussed earlier has agricultural purposes. It's collected, transported to the fields, and spread by hand. The smell is eye-watering, and the flies are ecstatic about your career choices. Once the crops are planted, the real anxiety begins. Too much rain, too little rain, unseasonable frost, pests, diseases. Any of these can devastate your harvest. Modern farmers have crop insurance. Viking farmers had sacrifices to the gods and a winter of potential starvation if things went wrong. Weeding is constant, done by hand or with simple hoes. Children as young as 5 or 6 are put to work at this task, crawling along rows from dawn to dusk, pulling unwanted plants that compete with the precious grain. Miss too many weeds, and your yield drops dangerously. Harvest is both the most crucial and most labor-intensive time of the agricultural year. Everyone works flat out, from the oldest grandparent to the youngest child. Grain is cut with iron sickles or scythes, bent over all day, slicing each stalk, gathering it into sheaves, working frantically before weather can destroy the crop. The cut grain must then be threshed to separate the edible part from the stalks. This is done by beating it with flails on a threshing floor. Repetitive, dusty work that fills your lungs with chaff and makes your arms feel like they're about to detach from your shoulders. Next comes winnowing, tossing the threshed grain into the air on breezy days so that the wind carries away the lighter chaff while the heavier grain falls back into your collection basket. It's a skill that takes years to perfect, and mistakes mean precious food literally blowing away in the wind. Finally, the grain must be dried to prevent spoilage, then stored in containers safe from moisture, rats, and other pests. Any failure in this process means potential ruin, but grain isn't the only crop. Gardens provide vegetables like cabbage, onions, beans, and peas. These require different care, different timing, and add more tasks to your already overwhelming agricultural calendar. Then there's animal husbandry, a delicate way of saying you're responsible for breeding, birthing, feeding, and eventually slaughtering various livestock. Vikings kept cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, and horses. Each species has its own requirements, its own diseases, its own ways of being troublesome. Sheep need shearing, a procedure that benefits neither the sheep's dignity nor your patience. The raw wool then needs cleaning, carding, spinning, and weaving, an entire production chain requiring specialized skills and tools. Cattle need milking twice daily regardless of weather, your health, or whether raiders are currently attacking the next settlement over. The milk then needs to be processed quickly into butter, cheese, or skyr, a yogurt-like dairy product, before it spoils. Haymaking is another critical task. Cutting, drying, and storing enough hay to feed your animals through the winter. Too little hay means deciding which animals to slaughter early because you can't feed them all. A dire calculation with long-term consequences for your farm's viability. Fences need constant maintenance to keep animals in and predators out. Tools break and must be repaired. Buildings deteriorate and require attention. Wells get contaminated. Pests invade stored food. The work is literally never-ending. And, after all this labor, a single bad season can still leave you hungry. A particularly harsh winter can kill the animals you can't afford to feed. Raiders, possibly including your neighbors doing some side hustling, might take what you've worked all year to produce. This is Viking agriculture. Uncertain, exhausting, and about as far from glorious battle as you can get. It's why many young men were eager to join summer raids. After a winter and spring of farming, swinging an axe at monks suddenly seemed like an attractive career change. But when the raids ended and the ships returned home, the fields were still there, demanding attention, indifferent to your warrior status, waiting to break your body one season at a time. You've survived the raid, navigated the deadly healthcare system, endured the brutal weather, and somehow managed not to starve despite the agricultural challenges. Now it's time to celebrate. The Jarl has called for a feast, which sounds like a welcome break from your daily gruel and stale bread. But Viking feasts aren't exactly five-star dining experiences. They're politically charged endurance tests with an alarming amount of vomiting and violence. The feast takes place in the Jarl's longhouse, which is larger and slightly less squalid than your own, but still filled with smoke, animals, and the same medieval funk. The room is crowded with warriors, their families, and thralls, slaves, serving food and drink. The lighting is minimal, some tallow candles and the eternal hearth fire, casting everything in an ominous, flickering glow. Seating arrangements are critically important and potentially deadly. Where you sit relative to the Jarl indicates your status. The closer to him, the more honored you are. If you've been seated far from him after previously enjoying a better position, everyone notices this public demotion. Your reputation takes an immediate hit, and people start whispering about what you might have done to fall from favor. The food, while more abundant than your daily fare, is still challenging. The centerpiece is likely a whole roasted animal, pig, goat, or sheep, cooked over the fire and seasoned with whatever herbs were available. It might be burnt on the outside and raw in the middle, but complaining is not an option. Side dishes include boiled vegetables, mostly cabbage, turnips, and onions, bread, cheese, and perhaps some dried fruits if it's been a good year for trade. The meat is carved with the same knives used for fighting, which may or may not have been cleaned first. There are no individual plates. You either eat from communal trenchers, wooden platters, shared with those seated near you, or you use a piece of stale bread as your personal plate, soaking up juices and sauces. Forks don't exist. You eat with your knife, your spoon, if you brought one, and your fingers. Table manners consist mainly of not stabbing your neighbor unless they truly deserve it. But the real star of any Viking feast is the alcohol: mead, fermented honey, ale, fermented grain, and occasionally imported wine flow freely. These aren't sipped politely. They're consumed in massive quantities from drinking horns or wooden cups that are constantly refilled by circulating thralls. The drinks are room temperature, which in a longhouse in winter means slightly warmer than you'd prefer, and in summer means unpleasantly hot. Drinking games are common and dangerous. You might be challenged to matches of bragging, where you must top another warrior's accomplishments with more impressive feats of your own, all while drinking to punctuate each boast. Refusing a drink is a serious insult, suggesting either weakness or distrust of your host. So you drink and drink and drink some more, even as the room begins to spin and your judgment deteriorates to dangerous levels. As the feast progresses, the noise becomes deafening. Everyone is shouting to be heard over everyone else. Skalds, poets, attempt to recite complex verses celebrating the Jarl's accomplishments or commemorating famous battles, but they're competing with drunk warriors arguing about who killed more Saxons during the last raid. Musical instruments, simple drums, flutes, and stringed lyre-like instruments add to the cacophony. The combination of alcohol, weapons, and fragile Viking honor is predictably volatile. Minor disagreements rapidly escalate. That warrior who's been giving you side-eye all night finally makes a comment about your performance during the last raid. Options: ignore it and lose face, respond verbally and risk escalation, or go straight to violence. None of these choices end well. Food fights aren't playful affairs, but potential starting points for blood feuds. Having a bone thrown at you isn't funny. It's a deliberate provocation that demands response. Even complimenting someone's wife too enthusiastically can end with a knife in your ribs. The Jarl is supposed to keep order, but he's as drunk as everyone else, and might even encourage conflicts between rivals for his own entertainment. Vomiting is not a cause for embarrassment, but a practical necessity to continue drinking. Some feasts last for days, with participants taking brief breaks to pass out before rejoining the festivities. The floor becomes a hazardous mixture of food scraps, spilled drinks, vomit, and possibly blood if the evening has been particularly entertaining. Sexual activities become increasingly public as the night wears on. Couples disappear into dark corners or simply don't bother with privacy at all. Thralls are often subjected to unwanted advances, with little recourse to refuse. Married people make poor decisions that will lead to complex feuds once everyone is sober again. By the feast's end, you're either unconscious, injured, or both. You've potentially made new enemies, damaged your reputation, and consumed enough alcohol to pickle your liver. The hangover that follows will be epic, accompanied by a vague sense of dread about what you might have said or done during the blur of the previous night. And the best part, you are expected to be ready for normal work the next day. Fields don't plow themselves, and those Christian monasteries aren't going to raid themselves. So you drag your aching body out of whatever corner you collapsed in, possibly pick a fight fragment out of your beard, and stagger back to your regular Viking life, already dreading the next celebration. Throughout your life as a Viking, you have heard glorious tales of the afterlife, the splendid halls of Valhalla, where valiant warriors feast and fight forever, or the peaceful meadows of Folkvanger, where the goddess Freya welcomes the honored dead. These stories brought comfort during the harsh realities of Norse existence. But now, as you face your own mortality, you discover that Viking death is as pragmatic, messy, and occasionally bizarre as Viking life. Let's consider how you might die. Despite the saga's emphasis on glorious battle deaths, most Vikings met their end through decidedly unglamorous means. Disease was the primary killer. Everything from tuberculosis to dysentery to infected wounds. Starvation during harsh winters claimed many lives. Accidents were common: drowning, falls, farming mishaps, perhaps, or being trampled by livestock. Even if you did die in battle, it was rarely the quick, heroic death of songs. It was more likely a slow, painful demise from infected wounds days or weeks after the fighting ended. Whatever the cause, your death triggers an elaborate set of funerary practices. These vary by region, social status, and local tradition, but they share common elements. First, your body is prepared by female family members. They wash you, dress you in your best clothes, and possibly adorn you with jewelry or meaningful objects. Your eyes and mouth are closed, your limbs arranged. If you've been dead a while before discovery, not uncommon in isolated areas, this process becomes significantly more unpleasant for everyone involved. The funeral itself might take days to arrange, especially if important people need to travel to attend. During this time, your body is, well, doing what bodies do after death. Preservation techniques are basic. Cold weather helps during winter, but in summer, the situation becomes increasingly olfactory. Your family might keep vigil, sharing stories of your life, drinking to your memory, and trying not to focus on the progressive changes overtaking your mortal remains. If you're a common Viking, your grave goods are modest. Some personal items, tools of your trade, perhaps food and drink for the journey. If you're wealthy or high status, the offerings are more elaborate. Weapons, imported luxury goods, sometimes sacrificed animals or even thralls, slaves to serve you in the afterlife. Yes, human sacrifice was practiced in some Viking funerals, though it became less common as Christianity's influence spread through Scandinavia. Lucky you if you were important enough to merit such honors. Decidedly unlucky for those accompanying you on your final journey. The most famous Viking funeral trope, the burning ship set adrift on water, was actually rare and reserved for the most elite members of society. The resources required were enormous. Ships were valuable assets not casually sacrificed. Most ship burials involved hauling vessels onto land and burying them in massive mounds. More commonly, those of modest means were cremated on simple pyres or buried in the ground with varying levels of ceremony. Cremation was common in early Viking society, believed to release the soul from the body. The process was less efficient than modern cremation. Your partially cremated bones would be collected from the ashes, sometimes crushed, and placed in an urn or buried. Grave markers ranged from simple stones to elaborate rune-carved monuments for the elite. As Christianity gradually spread through Viking lands, burial practices changed. Cremation gave way to inhumation, burial of the intact body, typically oriented east-west with the head facing east to greet Christ's resurrection. Grave goods became simpler or disappeared entirely, as the new religion discouraged such pagan practices. Your survivors mourned according to complex social customs. Widows might be expected to remain unmarried for a year, though practical concerns often abbreviated this period. Inheritance was distributed according to strict laws, with males typically receiving larger shares than females. Family members assumed responsibility for any unresolved feuds or debts, ensuring that your social obligations outlived you. Memorial feasts marked specific intervals after death, immediately following the funeral, then after a week, a month, and a year. These were opportunities for the community to remember the deceased, strengthen social bonds, and consume significant quantities of alcohol, which was considered both proper tribute to the dead and necessary anesthetic for the grieving. If you died in particularly suspicious or shameful circumstances, suicide, certain types of murder, or as an outlaw, you might be buried in unconsecrated ground, sometimes at crossroads or boundaries. This reflected fears that troubled souls could return to haunt the living. Some bodies were subjected to posthumous precautions, stones placed on the chest, decapitation, or staking to the ground, all designed to prevent the deceased from becoming draugr, undead creatures that plagued Norse folklore. The grave itself wasn't necessarily your final resting place. Archaeological evidence shows that graves were sometimes reopened to add new bodies, remove objects, or perform additional rituals. Your eternal peace might be interrupted by descendants with pressing spiritual or practical concerns. So, did you make it to Valhalla? According to Viking belief, that depended on how you died. how you lived, and which god had their eye on you. Warriors who died bravely in battle might be chosen by Odin's Valkyries for Valhalla, or by Freya for Folkvanger. Those who died of old age or disease might end up in Hell's domain, not a place of punishment like the Christian hell, but a shadowy afterlife lacking the glory of the warrior's reward. But here's the most sobering reality check. As the Viking Age progressed, these traditional beliefs gradually merged with and eventually yielded to Christian concepts of heaven, hell, and purgatory. By the end of the Viking era, many Vikings died with crosses around their necks, their passage to the afterlife overseen by priests rather than skalds, their destination no longer the mead halls of Asgard, but the kingdom of the Christian god. Your glorious Viking death? In reality, it probably involved pain, fear, practical funeral arrangements determined largely by economic status, and mourners who were already calculating how to divide your possessions before your body was cold. The sagas might immortalize heroes, but ordinary Vikings simply died, were grieved, and eventually forgotten, just like the rest of humanity throughout history. We've journeyed through the grim realities of Viking existence, from the foul longhouses to the terror of raids, from the back-breaking labor to the primitive health care, from the relentless social pressures to the final indignities of death. Now, let's confront the uncomfortable truth. You, modern human, wouldn't last a single day in this world. The physical demands alone would destroy you. The average Viking performed more manual labor before breakfast than most modern people do in a week. Rowing a longship required upper body strength developed through years of farming, fighting, and survival. Your gym membership and occasional weekend hike have not prepared you for hauling water, chopping wood, plowing fields, or swinging weapons in actual combat. Within hours, your muscles would be screaming in ways you've never experienced. By nightfall, you'd be unable to move. The sensory assault would overwhelm you. You've grown accustomed to clean water, regular bathing, deodorant, and sewage systems that whisk waste away at the push of a lever. Viking era smells would hit you like a physical force. Human and animal waste, unwashed bodies, smoke, rotting food, tanning leather, and the omnipresent damp wool. Your stomach would rebel. Your eyes would water constantly. You might actually vomit the first time you entered a longhouse during winter, when everyone and everything had been sealed inside for months. Disease would find you immediately. Your immune system, while impressive by modern standards, is unprepared for the microbial ecosystem of the Viking Age. You have no resistance to common medieval pathogens. That infected wound from your blistered rowing hands, potentially fatal. That casual cough from the person sharing your drinking horn could be tuberculosis. The winter sniffles that everyone else endures might kill you before spring. Without antibiotics, vaccinations, or even basic understanding of germ theory, your body would be under constant pathogenic siege. The food would be inedible by your standards. Rancid butter, half-rotten meat preserved in whey, fermented as shark, stockfish, dried fish so hard it must be beaten with a hammer before eating, and sour, heavy bread filled with chaff and occasional bits of millstone. Your digestive system, accustomed to sanitized modern food, would react with violent rejection. Malnutrition and foodborne illness would quickly follow. The cold would shock your system. Modern humans move from climate-controlled homes to climate-controlled vehicles to climate-controlled workplaces. The relentless, bone-deep cold of a Scandinavian winter, faced with only wool clothing and inadequate shelter, would be traumatic. Chilblains, frostbite, and hypothermia would become intimate companions rather than abstract concepts. The darkness would affect your mental health profoundly. Seasonal affective disorder hits modern people with electric lighting and Netflix. Imagine months of almost complete darkness in a smoky longhouse with nothing but firelight and endless ghost stories. The psychological impact would be devastating. The violence would paralyze you. You've likely never been in a real fight, never mind a battle where the objective is to kill other humans with hand weapons. The reality of combat, the sounds, smells, and visceral horror of watching blades cut flesh would trigger a fight-or-flight response your modern brain hasn't evolved beyond. you'd freeze or flee, neither of which is conducive to survival in a shield wall. The medical care, or lack thereof, would terrify you. The first time you saw a serious wound treated with hot iron and prayers, or a tooth extracted with rudimentary pliers, you'd realize how dependent you are on modern pain management and sterile procedures. Your expectation of treatment and recovery would collide violently with Viking medical reality. The social complexity would doom you. You don't know the intricate, unwritten rules of Viking society: when to speak, when to remain silent, how to address people of different status, what gestures might be interpreted as insults. Within hours, you'd commit a social faux pas serious enough to damage your standing. Within days, you might inadvertently trigger a blood feud. The work never ends. Modern humans are accustomed to defined work hours, weekends, vacations, and retirement. Viking life was constant labor from childhood until death or disability, with only religious festivals offering brief respite. The sheer relentlessness of the workload would crush your modern expectation of leisure time. The lack of privacy would drive you mad. You've grown up with personal space, private bedrooms, bathroom doors that lock, the constant, inescapable presence of others. Watching, judging, smelling, touching would create psychological distress your modern mind isn't equipped to handle. Even your advantages wouldn't help much. Yes, you have knowledge of germ theory, physics, navigation, and other advanced concepts, but without the infrastructure, tools, and social framework to implement this knowledge, it's largely useless. Trying to explain bacteria to people who believe illness is caused by evil spirits won't get you far. Attempting to introduce new technologies without the necessary materials or manufacturing capabilities would be an exercise in frustration. Here's the brutal truth. Your modern body, mind, and expectations have been shaped by a world of comfort, safety, and convenience that would be utterly alien to the Viking Age. The hardy people who survived and even thrived in that harsh reality weren't superhumans. They were products of their environment, raised from birth to endure what you would find unbearable. So the next time you romanticize Viking life or imagine yourself as a fearsome Norse warrior, remember this: you almost certainly wouldn't make it through your first day. By nightfall, you'd be a broken, sobbing mess, begging for antibiotics, privacy, and a hot shower. The Vikings might find this amusing, at least until your inability to contribute made you a burden on their limited resources. After that, well, let's just say their practical approach to problem-solving rarely prioritized sentimentality. So, you've made it through our journey into the grim realities of Viking existence. We've stripped away Hollywood's glamorous veneer and exposed the dirty, painful, smelly truth of Norse life. From the bug-infested longhouses to the brutal raids, from the back-breaking farm labor to the primitive health care, from the bizarre social customs to the decidedly unglamorous deaths, it's been a sobering tour. For all their fearsome reputation, Vikings were ultimately just people trying to survive in an unforgiving environment with the limited resources and knowledge available to them. They weren't superhumans or monsters, but products of their harsh world, pragmatic, resilient, and bound by cultural expectations we can barely comprehend from our modern perspective. Perhaps, most importantly, they weren't thinking of themselves as Vikings at all. That term, as we use it today, would have been foreign to them. They were farmers who sometimes went Viking, raiding, craftspeople, traders, explorers, and family members navigating the same universal human concerns: security, sustenance, meaning, connection that we still grapple with today. Their sagas and stories, with their fantastical elements and larger-than-life heroes, weren't historical documents but cultural expressions, serving many of the same purposes our entertainment does now: inspiration, escapism, reinforcement of values, and simple narrative pleasure. The real lives behind these tales were shorter, harder, and far less glorious than the myths suggest. And yet, there is something genuinely genuinely impressive about the Viking Age. These were people who navigated the stormy North Atlantic in open boats without compasses or charts, established trade networks stretching from Baghdad to Newfoundland, created intricate art and complex social systems, and adapted to environments so challenging that they shaped descendants tough enough to survive across centuries. Their innovations in shipbuilding, navigation, and trade changed the face of Europe. Their explorations connected continents. Their myths and stories still resonate in our literature, films, and games. For all the harshness of their world, they created beauty in their jewelry, poetry, and craftsmanship that continues to captivate us. So, as you drift off to sleep in your comfortable bed, with clean sheets, temperature control, and antibiotics just a pharmacy trip away, perhaps spare a thought for your Viking ancestors or their contemporaries. They endured conditions we can barely imagine, not because they were fundamentally different from us, but because humans are remarkably adaptable creatures. They did what we all do, made the best of the world they inherited, and hoped to leave something meaningful behind. The real Viking legacy isn't the romanticized version of longships and battle axes, but the reminder of human resilience in the face of extraordinary challenges, and perhaps a much-needed perspective check when we complain about slow Wi-Fi or slightly delayed food deliveries. Now, dim the lights completely, pull up your non-lice-infested blankets, and be thoroughly grateful that you're falling asleep in 2025, not 872. Good night, and may your dreams be free of angry jarls, seasickness, and medieval plumbing.